All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to this presentation, which is actually not so much of a presentation. It's going to be kind of like a facilitated workshop. And I'm really looking forward to this because it's looking at how to get things done when so many things are changing around you and the world is a bit uncertain. So it's very much around productivity, it's around priorities, it's about planning for 2021 and beyond. Welcome to all the people who are here. I can see most people have got their cameras off, but that's okay. That's all right. Great to see you here. This is a very different presentation from the kind of presentations that most people would have seen me do before. So I can see some people here who saw me present in the last couple of days at the Professional Conference Organizers Association conference, and that was more of a presentation. This hour is going to be more of a workshop, so be ready to do some work. In fact, I can tell you that if you're going to get ready, you need a couple of sheets of paper. So make sure you've got those close to hand. So you need a paper and pen. If you do normally take your notes on an iPad or tablet or your laptop, this isn't going to work because you're going to be folding the paper. And I found that doesn't work too well on tablets and iPads and laptops. So have a couple of sheets of paper with you, and we'll do this exercise that's coming up soon. I'm recording this session, and so the recording will be available to everybody, so I'll send it out to everybody who registers, and the exercises that I do in this and the ideas that I share, please feel free to share this with your team as well. And in fact, a lot of people know me because I talk about, as a futurist, I talk about high-level planning and scenario planning and work with leadership teams. And many people don't know that I do this sort of work as well. So getting down and rolling up your sleeves and working with your team to think about what's really important for us and what's important for us looking at our future and at an individual level, not just at an organizational level. So if you like what you see today, then absolutely have a chat about how we can run this for your teams as well. But today is very much about you, and I want to make sure that you can get maximum value from this. And it is going to be quite interactive. It is personal because you're talking about your own goals and priorities and plans. So I'm not going to ask, whatever you write down on the bit of paper, I'm not going to ask you to hold it up to the video and share it with everybody else. I will encourage you to use the chat as much as possible, and maybe we'll get time where you can turn on your microphone and ask questions as well. But I kind of like this environment. I like this. So in the past, when I've run this in person in a workshop where people are working at tables, even in a small group, I kind of like this online version because it feels quite intimate. You can still do everything that's relevant for you. You can still ask me questions. We'll have time at the end to break out into small groups and discuss some of the ideas. But in some ways, like this online platform can be quite effective and can be more intimate than working in person. If you play along and you take part, and it's up to you to decide how much you want to get out of this, making it interactive. And of course, if you're watching the recording, then just press pause when you need to go off and do the little exercises and bits. Okay, so that's how we're going to work. That's the rules of engagement for today. I want to start by giving you a couple of really practical tips about how to get things done when things are changing. And these are really practical, nitty-gritty, day-by-day tips that you can use to, you've set your priorities, you're trying to work, you're trying to make progress, and things are getting in the way. So I want to share two tips with you. So one is based on a true story from about 100 years ago. Charles Schwab, who was an American industrialist at the time, one of the richest men in the world at the time, he wanted help with his productivity in getting things done. So he brought in this consultant, I.V. Cole, and he said to Cole, can you give me some advice? What systems and processes can we put into place so that I can be productive and do the things that I should be doing and not get distracted by everybody else? Way before social media, but still there were lots of other distractions. And so Cole said, I've got an idea for you, and I'm going to tell you what it is, and I want you to try it out for a couple of weeks. And at the end of that time, pay me whatever you think it's worth. So I gave him this idea. At the end of 2 weeks, he wrote him a check for $20,000. Like, this is 100 years ago, so that was a fortune at that time. It's not too shabby even now. But that idea was so powerful that Schwab considered it worthwhile paying a fortune to this consultant. So here's the idea. So what he said to Schwab was, every morning, before you do anything else, make a list of the things that you want to achieve in the day in priority order, and then look at number 1 and work on that. When you finish that, cross it off, go to number 2, work on that, and so on. Like, this is such a simple idea, such as you might even say it's a simplistic idea, but this is what made Schwab think this is worth paying a fortune to this guy for showing me this idea. Now, in the 21st century, not all of us have the luxury of being the boss and the senior manager and having the ability to say, I'm going to work on this, closing my office door until I get through this, don't interrupt me. We get all sorts of interruptions and distractions through our day. So I want to give you the 21st century version of this. This is not my idea. This is an idea from my friend Neen James. If you haven't read her book, Folding Time, I reckon you should. It's fantastic books. Neen's an Australian who now lives in the USA, and she's embraced the American part of her life, but she's very much an Australian as well. So her version of this is to use Post-it notes. So she says, at the start of every day, every morning, spend 10 or 15 minutes and grab a Post-it note, or maybe 3, depends whether you want to do 1 or 3. And she says, write down the 3 important things that you want to get done today. And they're things that aren't already on your calendar and that are going to happen anyway. So for me, running this presentation is an important thing, but I wouldn't write it down there because that's going to happen anyway. It's date night with my fiance Nikki tonight. That's going to happen, so I don't need to write that down on there. It's not going to get overlooked by something else. But there are other things that I need to do. So for example, I'm working on a chapter of my new book, and I want to look up some resources and make sure that I get that into that chapter. That's something that's important, but is easy for me to let it slide. Okay, so the idea is, the start of the day, write down 3 things that you want to achieve, and then you walk around with that Post-it note or the 3 Post-it notes around with you all day, or you rip them off and stick them on the top of your laptop so you always remember, they're always in front of mind. Then what happens is, when something comes along during the day that's not on one of those 3 things, you ask yourself, is this more important than the 3 things, or maybe 2 or 1 if you've already covered some of them? Is this more important than what's on my list? And if it is, and look, sometimes it is, if it is, then you say, I need to drop everything and do that because it's more important and possibly more urgent. But if it's not, and most of the time it's not, then you say, okay, I need to do it, but it's not more important than these 3 things, so it goes into a to-do list somewhere else, and I can get back to working on those 3 things. Okay, now this is such a powerful technique to use, and now you can do it with Post-it notes, you can do it with an app. So on my phone, I have a little app that has my top 3 things that I want to achieve for the day in a little note that appears on my home screen of my phone. So you can do it whatever way you like, but the key is that you're creating your priorities for the day before letting other people's priorities get in the way. We'll talk a little bit more about other people's priorities later on, but this is such a powerful thing to do. And some days you won't get through all 3 things because other more important things arrive. Some days you will get through all of them, and you'll be surprised if you set that priority for yourself at the start of the day. You'll be surprised how often you actually will be able to get through and achieve the things that are on your list. Okay, so that's the first really practical thing that I want to give you, a practical piece of advice around that. Any questions or comments, or just ask me about that. Tell me if you use something similar. Tell me if you use something that doesn't work as well. So please use the chat room for this. And in the chat, just type in you can send it just to me, but I'd rather that you send it to everyone. So tell me whether you do it. So the Folding Time author's name is Neen James. I'll put that in the chat for you. Yes, and my mate Neen, I've known her for 20 years, I think, and so she talks about time management, but her angle on this is not about time management, it's about attention management. And Folding Time is actually one of her earlier books. She's written a lot more now. I reckon you should subscribe to her newsletter as well and get some more ideas from her. In fact, today is very much about attention management. And I really want to start by sharing with you Neen's idea, because it's such a simple thing that you can do and it's completely within your control. Okay, let's see if there's anything else, because I want to share with you one other thing before we get on to setting your priorities. Because I really want to give you some really practical things that you can do. So we're going to talk about big picture soon, and what's really important to you, and how do you make sure that those are the priorities that don't get overlooked. But I also want to make sure that you don't walk away from here without practical things. All right, I want to teach you something else as well. By the way, if you haven't got me on speaker view, it's worth doing that. So I'm going to keep everyone on gallery views so that I can see everybody. And if you raise hands or you turn on microphones, I can see that. But I reckon you should have me on speaker view while we're doing this. Okay, so the second technique is called the... Oh, okay, let me just see what Julia says. What are your thoughts about not reading emails for the first hour of each day? Yeah, so Julia, look, I will talk about this because you asked, Julia. I wasn't planning to. I think the key principle around email is that if you were to open your inbox now and you had a look at the emails that were in there, I bet you 80% of them, maybe even 100% of them, are not your goals and your priorities. They're probably other people's goals and priorities. So if you control your day, or let your day be controlled by what's in your inbox, you're basically randomly allowing your day to be managed by what other people have on top as top of mind for them. So I've got a process around inbox zero, which is like, if I looked at my email inbox now, there'd literally be 0 messages in there. It doesn't mean that nothing came in today. It's just that as soon as an email arrives, if I know I need to deal with it today, I file it into this little folder called Today. Okay, it doesn't get lost. It's in a Today folder. If I know I don't need to address it till later this week, it goes into this week. And if I don't need to address it at all this week, it goes into later. So I've got today, this week, and later. And so I read my inbox frequently. Like anytime I get bored, I pick up open my inbox and read it. But I don't get distracted by it. Everything either gets deleted or moved into today, this week, or later folder. And that way I make sure that it still fits in really well with Neen's process, that if it's not more important than something else that's on my list, then I can defer it. Even if it's something really urgent, I put it in the Today folder, make sure I go through all the other emails, and then file those away into those folders, and then go to the really urgent things. So my inbox is always, literally always empty within 30 seconds of me opening it. Okay, so I reckon you should try that technique as well. It's for some people it sounds like moving deck chairs on the Titanic, because you think I'm just getting swamped with stuff. Just moving emails into a folder doesn't make a difference. But if you've never tried it, and it's been a long time since you've had an empty inbox when you open your email, you just can't believe the psychological impact of being able to do that. Yeah, so thanks for asking the question, Julia. It wasn't something I was going to address, but I'm glad we did. Yeah, that's right. So Chris says, should these 3 daily objectives be achievable, and it's not your long-term objects like cure world hunger? Absolutely right. So these are tasks that you want to achieve in the day. So for me, my 3, I'll give you a couple of them. So one is to do that work on my chapter of my book. Another one is I'm investigating some new proposal building software that I bought a license to. So I want to do a dummy proposal in that. And so these are tasks that I want to achieve that are helping me move towards the cure world hunger goal, as you put it, Chris. And in fact, most of today is going to be about figuring out what your big priorities are. But I want to give you some practical things, because otherwise it's easy to have the big priorities and then interruptions come along, and then you just throw the big goals aside because you think, I'll get around to it sometime when the world slows down. And of course, that's not going to happen. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so here's a second really useful process that you can use daily. It's called the Pomodoro technique. And Pomodoro is the Italian word for tomato, and it's based on the idea of those kitchen timers that are shaped like tomatoes. I actually don't have a Pomodoro, but I do have a little chicken. I have a chicken egg timer. So it's basically the timers that you can set. So the guy who invented it, he thought of quirky name Pomodoro, so he called it the Pomodoro technique, and it's kind of stuck. The Pomodoro technique is an easy way for you to get chunks of work done without having to set aside your whole day or half a day to get work done. So the idea of the Pomodoro technique, and by the way, there are apps that do this now, is that you say, I'm going to work on some piece of work for half an hour, and you set this timer and you set it for 25 minutes. You set it for 25 minutes, and then you start your work. And the idea is that you say to yourself, I'm not going to get distracted for the next 25 minutes while I'm working on this. At the end of that 25 minutes, the timer goes, and you reset it 5 minutes, and that's your 5-minute break. For me, that's the time that I'll go and check my email. 3 emails may have come in that half hour, or 30 emails may have come in. It takes me 30 seconds to clear them, have a smug look on my face, and then I might get up, get a drink of water, go for a walk, check social media, whatever. And then at the end of that 5 minutes, I set my 25 minutes again. So the idea is you break up your work into half-hour sections, and the first 25 minutes, you're focused on your work, and knowing that you've got this 5-minute break coming up within the half hour. Because we have become addicted to interrupting ourselves. Okay, so how many people do you know, and it might include you and people you know, who are standing in line waiting for a coffee, and they pull out their smartphone and they read something, and that's okay. That's a useful way of doing it. I've decided that I want to reduce that addiction. So when I'm standing waiting for coffee, I don't look at my phone. That doesn't mean that I'm going on a complete phone fasting, social media fast or anything like that. I'm not. But I just want to make sure that I don't have that automatic reaction. And the Pomodoro technique is a really useful thing that you can do. I recommend you try it. It's especially useful if you're working from home, or you've got part of your team working from home, for them to use the Pomodoro technique when there are so many other things that could easily distract them. It gives them permission to be distracted, but only for 5 minutes at a time after they've done a chunk of work. So if you've got a big chunk of work that's going to take 3 hours, just break them up into, 6 Pomodoros. And you experiment with it, figure out what works for you. So I've figured for me, and I've realized that for me, 25 minutes is not enough. It was good at the start, but now I need about 40 minutes. It gets me into the task, I can work on it, the app rings, and then I take an 8-minute break. So for me, it's 40 minutes and 8 minutes. I saw some other research that said 53 minutes and 8 is the optimal, it's a sweet spot. But I reckon you should start with the 25 and 5 and just try it. And it's really effective. And there's some teams who even work this way. So even in an office, they set it up so at every half hour, you know that you're working on your work, and you shouldn't be getting up and interrupting somebody else because they're in the middle of a Pomodoro. And it's only when the 5-minute break happens that everyone's got permission to then relax and do whatever else they need to do before the next Pomodoro starts. It sounds like a very regimented system, but it's so effective, because one of the things you need is to have some rules around how you're going to get things done. And if you say, my rule is I've got a 3-hour task, so I need to set aside half a day uninterrupted to be able to do that, it's easy to just keep putting that off, because when are you going to be able to do it? Okay, so try Pomodoro. Any questions about Pomodoro before we continue? I really love the Pomodoro technique. It's something that I read about a long time ago, and when I first saw it, I thought, this is too simple. It's not going to work, but it's so effective. It's really effective. And now in my 8-minute break, I have time to check email, go for a little walk, actually literally check social media if I need to, if I want to, if I feel like it, pet the dogs, whatever I need to do. Okay, so that's a Pomodoro technique. Anything else? What if your break takes much longer? Is your next Pomodoro shorter? Jackie, I'm happy for you to turn your mic on and just clarify what you mean by that. Are you saying if you want a longer break, or if for some reason the break goes a bit longer?
Yes, what if I'm not disciplined enough to take my 5 minute break and really it ends up being a 10 or 15 minute break?
Yeah, so
But I still have to get my 3 hours done,
yeah.
and now my breaks are too long.
So I reckon, Jackie, you should start by just following the rules. So be really strict around it and say when the bell goes, then I'm going to start my work, do my 25-minute sprint, and it's also being strict about taking the break. So when the 25 minutes goes, if I'm in the middle of creating a PowerPoint presentation, then I just stop, I save it, and then take my 5 minute break and then come back to it. So start off by being strict. So I must admit that I'm sometimes a little bit slack about it as well. So if my 8 minute break goes into 10 minutes, it's okay, but I've got the discipline of uninterrupted work. So it's not so much the break time that's important, it's the fact that you've got 25 minutes of uninterrupted work. And for many of us, when was the last time that you spent 25 minutes uninterrupted, apart from in a meeting, but uninterrupted working on your own stuff in the middle of a working day? It's one of the reasons why productivity goes up when you've got teams working from home, because the people who are working on their tasks, they tend not to get interrupted by their colleagues who are walking past their cubicle or asking them, I'm going to go out and get coffee, what's your coffee order? So productivity goes up, and that's one of the things. So I reckon, Jackie, start by just being strict around it, and then you can decide what you're willing to allow yourself to relax on. Marina, should you ignore phone calls or team calls during the time? Yeah, that's right. That's the idea, that you if you get a call, you either put your phone on silent or you don't answer it, and then you return the call or you return messages that time. So you can put your phone on. When I do it, I put my phone on flight mode, which is possibly the only use of flight mode this year. But I put my phone on flight mode while I'm doing the Pomodoro, and then I can turn it back on afterwards. Or you don't have to be as strict as that, but basically the idea is get the work done in that time. Okay, so I want to give you those really practical things to start with, and I hope that you find them useful when you're now implementing the goals that you're going to have, that you're going to work on. But the key to all of this is knowing what's important. So I want to spend quite a bit of time now looking at what's really important for you and to you. So this is where the bits of paper come in, right? So you've got, what I'd like you to do is have two bits of paper, so two sheets of A4 letter, that size of paper, and I'm going to get you to fold them. So I'm going to get you to fold them in specific ways, very easy folding. We're not going to be doing any specific origami here. So first take a sheet of paper. Not going to just ask people to turn on the videos and just wave them around, but take a sheet of paper and fold it in half. You're basically going to fold it into 8 pieces, eight segments, right? So take your piece of paper, fold it in half. You're actually going to do this for both sheets. So if you want to do both sheets together, you can, or just do them separately. Then fold it again. So you've now got 4 sheets, 4 segments, and then fold it one more time. Okay, and just crease them, so you've got 8 segments. Okay, pretty basic folding, so you're going to end up with something that looks like this. And what I'd like you to do is have 2 sheets that are folded into segments. So you've got 8 segments. Easy folding. Please do that, and do that for your 2 sheets of paper. Okay, so what you're going to end up with is 16 rectangles. And what I'm going to do very soon, not just yet, but what I'll do is set this up so that I'm going to give you a timer, and I'm going to ask you to write something in those rectangles. But what I'm going to ask you to do is for each of those rectangles, so each one of them, just write. So when I start the timer and ask you to write something, write it in about the top third. Okay, so that's the thing, and then we'll use the rest of that rectangle later on. Okay, all right, so I hope I've given you enough time to do the writing. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a minute, and we'll get the timer set up ready to go. So I'm going to give you a minute, and what I'd like you to do in that minute is, you've got 16 rectangles. So on the 2 sheets of 8, you won't get time to do all 16, but I'd like you to do at least 10. And what I'd like you to do is write down in each of those rectangles in the top third, a person, a thing, a something, a project that's important to you. okay, in each of those. So you're going to end up with between 10 to 16. There may be some blanks left over as spares and you might want them later. All right, so I'll give you a minute starting now. And yeah, a person, a thing, a project that's important in your life, So I'll let you choose personal life, professional life. Okay, you've got a minute. Wow, time goes fast when you're having fun, doesn't it? All right, so that's a minute. So I hope you've written at least one sheet's worth, which is 8, and maybe a couple on the other one as well. Are you okay with that? Anyone got any questions that you want me to clarify? If you want, so you'll probably end up with a few spare pieces, and that's okay because you might add to that list later. Okay, so the next step is we're just going to rip the bits of paper into the 8 segments. Okay, so all you do, rip them up. So you've got 8, well, you'll end up with 16 and just keep the blank ones there as well. So just literally fold and rip. Okay, and just you'll end up with 16 bits, some which will have a thing, a person, a project or a thing on them, and some which won't. All right, I'm just going to give you a little bit of time to do that. So ripping. All right, how are you going, folks? Do you need more time? Let me know in the chat if you do, but otherwise I'm going to assume that we've got enough. Okay, so you've got this bunch of, okay, so Charlie says a little bit more time. All right, I'll give you 15 seconds. I'll tell you what's coming up next. So you've got these things that are important to you. So I didn't tell you what they should be specifically. I allowed you to do them in any area of your personal or professional life. If you have a partner, I hope your partner is one of the list. If you haven't, then you maybe frantically want to scribble that down on one of the blank bits of paper. All right, so you've got some things on your list which are important to you. I'd like you to pick out of them. I reckon there are 3 which are not negotiables, which 3 things that are absolutely, if I got rid of everything else in my life, I'd be okay, but I could not get rid of these 3 things, projects, people. Okay, so you identify 3 of them and put them in a pile on your table somewhere, on your desk somewhere. And then of the others, choose up to 5 which are also important to you. And the reason I'm asking you to limit it to 5 is because it's easy to say everything's important, but it's not easy to then make decisions in the moment about prioritizing. Okay, so you have 3 which are not negotiable, and 5, up to 5, so there could be fewer than 5, up to 5 which are also important. And then have a look at the others that you've left aside and just ask yourself, do any of them need to go into my B pile? They probably don't need to go into the A, they're not negotiables, because you've already identified that those are not negotiable, but there may be some that you want to move into that second pile of up to 5. And also at this point, you might find that there's something else that you forgot, and it really is important, and especially because we're talking about planning for the future, that you want to throw it into the list. So that's why you've got the blank bits of paper if you want to add it. So you're going to end up with 8. So 3 which are not negotiable, and up to 5 which are the next level down. Okay, up to 8. They don't have to be 8. All right. Now, when I run this in a workshop format, and especially if we have a little bit more time than an hour, then I'll ask people to work on all 8 of those, starting with the top 3. But I reckon for now, and if I run the compressed version, like the online version, then we'll do the first 3. So have a look at your 3, those 3 that you've decided are not negotiable for you, and you've chosen. Some of them might be personal, they might all be personal, some of them might be professional, they might all be professional. Of those 3, or for all of those 3, in the last 90 days, are you happy with the amount of time, effort, attention, resources you've placed on those 3 things? So if you are, just put a tick next to them. If you're not, put a cross next to them. For this one, I'm happy for you to go to that second pile of 5 as well. So of those up to 8 that you've got, are you happy? And like, I'm not telling you how you should judge whether you're happy with it. If it's, for me, like relationship with my 21-year-old stepdaughter, am I happy with the relationship that I've had with her over the last 90 days? Absolutely. Okay, and I am. But there are maybe other things where I go, this is important, but the real test is, have I really put the time and the effort and the energy into them? Okay, over the last 90 days. And some of them you might say it's not appropriate because it's a new project that I'm about to start. And that's okay. In that case, it's okay to give yourself a tick. But if you can be tougher on yourself than you might think. So don't give yourself a free pass. Don't be lenient. Okay, so you're going to get some things with ticks and some things with crosses, and I'm not going to ask you to share any of them, but this is useful for you to know where you're starting from. Because if you find that you've got a lot of crosses on the list, then perhaps it means that for whatever reason, and I'm not judging, for whatever reason, you have got lots of important things, but you're not devoting the time, the energy, the resources, the attention to them. And it may be a number of factors, but there's a mismatch between what you care about, what's important, and what you're actually being able to achieve. If you've got a lot of ticks, congratulations, you're well on the path. But this process will help you identify, and I'm going to also give you some really practical things that you can do now to make sure that they stay a priority even when things are changing. All right, I think I've given you enough time for ticks and crosses. Is everyone happy with that? Okay, so here's the next step now. So let's only work with those top 3. So you've got those top 3 which are not negotiable. They're the things that are really important for you. And let's look at those now. So if you look at, as I said, what we're going to do is what you've done with those 3 is you've made them, if you take just those 3 sheets of paper where you've written the thing on the top, and sorry, Lani, what was that? Was there somebody who said something? Was it Lani? Okay, no, I think there's just a mistake there with the muting. That's okay. I think 2020's word of the, 2020's word of the year, I think is going to be unmute. That's my 2020 word of the year for all the people who are speaking while they're on mute so much in so many meetings. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. So take those 3. So you've got the top 3 on your list, which you've got, and you've written something at the top of the top third. So what I'm going to work through here is you've written something here, and we're going to work through 3 things. And the 3 things are action, habit, and as if. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of aha around this, and I'm going to give you 3 specific things that you can do to help make those things a priority for you coming up in the next few days, weeks, months, and the next year. Okay, and it's so the first one is action. So what I want you to do is take, for those 3 things, choose some action that you're going to take in the next week, ideally even sooner than the next week. What's something that you can do in the next week that's going to advance that item? So if it's a relationship with somebody, what are you going to do in the next week? If it's a project that you're working on, what can you do in the next week? And I'm saying a week to give you a week to do this. But ideally, if you say, I can do something today that'll advance this, or I think it will advance this. Okay, so what's something that you can do that will advance this? So, and just write that down on that bit of paper. So what's something that I can do that's within my control that I can do to make this happen? It might be totally within your control. If it involves somebody else, it might be partly within your control. So if you decide that you want to bring somebody on board as a reverse mentor, or you want to get mentoring, and that's really important to you, then maybe you go out and ask. And it might not be totally within your control to actually make it happen, but at least you can ask. And it's got to be something specific. So it's not something vague. It's not like spend more time with Abby. It's like something specific. So book a lunch date with Abby, for whatever. Okay, so it's got to be specific. So what's some action that you can take immediately? So I'm going to give you a little bit of time to write that down. I'll just shut up for 30 seconds. So in sailing, there's a term called Uching. So to do an Uch is something that I quite often, when I'm working with leaders around innovation and change, I teach them this idea of Uching. And the idea is that if you're out sailing and the wind completely drops, you're becalmed on the water and you don't know what to do, then what you do is you Uch. And Uching simply means you just try something, anything. And based on what happens, then you decide what the next step is. So what I'm asking you to do here is, what's an Uch? So even if you're not sure what the outcome is going to be, this little activity that you can do, this little action that you've chosen, will help you know a little bit more. And it'll help you decide what the next step is. So if I decide, and if I say I'm going to have lunch with my stepdaughter Abby, and I invite her to lunch, and I find that she's busy for the next week, at least I've got some information which then lets me make an alternative arrangement. But if I don't ask her because I think she's on uni holidays and she's probably going to be busy, then I would never know. So don't make those decisions in your head. That's why I want you, the first thing to do is to take some action. And decision making in general, Uching is a really good thing to do in general. And if you think it sounds a bit amateurish, then think of it as a pilot project or a prototype, or in app development or lean methodology, it's called building a minimum viable product. Okay, so do an Uch. So I hope that you've had time to write down for each of your top 3 items, what's something that you can do to Uch? What's a specific action that you can take to advance those 3 things? Any questions or comments or ideas around that? Anything else you want to say around the whole Uching process, or for yourself, anything you want me to clarify? Okay, here's the next one. So the next one, the H in here, is habit. I remember when I was teaching Abby driving, when she was getting her L plates, and I said one of the things I said to her was, Abs, 99% of what you do when you drive will purely be habit. So now's the time to really build those good habits. And it meant things like looking over your shoulder every time, even if you know that there's nothing coming behind you when you want to change lanes. Just get into the habit of doing it. And habits drive our lives. We don't often like to admit that we're driven by our habits, but it's exactly what we do. Julia says, how do you spell Uch? Exactly the way that you spelled it there, Julia. So O-O-C-H, exactly right. So how do you build habits? Because habit trumps discipline every time. So if you've got, what's a habit that you automatically do? Of course, what you do is you brush your teeth twice a day. You put your seatbelt on, buckle up as soon as you get into the car. This year, you wash your hands as soon as you get back in and use hand sanitizer or soap. And if you build that up as a habit, then you don't have to think twice about it. It just happens automatically. It means you don't need the discipline. You don't need to think about, do I need to do this? So I think wearing pants to work was a habit until 2020 when everybody was on Zoom calls. But those sort of things, if they're habits and they're not things that you have to think about, it just takes away so much of your cognitive load. Okay, so what habit can you create that's going to help you advance this goal? So whatever your goal is, what's a habit that you're going to create around the goal? And I'm going to suggest that there are two ways that you could create habits. One is that you could do it based on a calendar. Okay, you can say, I'm going to, every Monday morning, this is what I'm going to do. So I've got a client, and her goal is that Mondays are marketing Mondays. So she just does marketing on Mondays. Somebody else I know who, he's got a habit that says before 8 a.m. I'm going to cross off one of the 3 items that I had as an important thing. And then the day's off to a great start. I generally have a habit, especially in summer, that I do my daily exercise, go for a run or go for a bike ride before anything else, so early in the morning. And it then becomes habitual. So that's one thing that you could do, is that it could go in your calendar and it happens at a certain time. The second way that you could create a habit is that you attach it to some other habit that you've already got. Here's an example. Suppose you've got this habit, and I'm not saying it's necessarily a good habit, but suppose you've got this habit that you, in your Pomodoro 5-minute break, you automatically go and check social media. That's okay, that's right, you're giving yourself permission to do that. But if you want to attach something else to that, maybe it is that before you click the Facebook button, you also click another button, that a Feedly button, which has the blogs that you subscribe to, and you read an interesting article before you go onto Facebook. Doesn't mean you don't go onto Facebook, it just means you attach it. So again, that becomes a habit. So now you've created opportunities for you to read blogs. This is a time where you might say that you attach it to, the idea is that you attach it to something that's going to happen anywhere in your life, and it doesn't have to be if it's a work habit you want to create, it doesn't have to be a work-related habit that you attach it to. It could be anything. Okay, so what can you do to create that sort of habit? So again, I'd like you on your little bit of paper here to write down a habit that you're going to do to advance that particular relationship or project or thing in the coming months. Again, just having it as a habit means it happens automatically. You don't need to spend a lot of time thinking about it. Yep, Annette says, thanks Annette, thanks for coming, and yes, you get the recording, and there's some other people who are jumping in and out as well, and that's quite okay. Okay, let's do the last one. The last one is called as if. So even more powerful than habit is identity. So if you are this kind of person, then you will act in this way. And it's easy because you can make judgments based on your values. So we can go through a whole process of aligning your values and figuring out what your most important values are. But if there are certain things that, but if all of that is wrapped up in an identity, it makes decisions easy. So if you say, I'm an Australian, and because of that, certain things apply. So I say I'm an Australian, and I don't like the fact that other Australians are stuck overseas and they can't get home. I think as an Australian, we have a responsibility to bring those people home. So I don't want to make this political or anything, but part of that identity might be that. There are people who say, I'm a vegan, and it makes my eating choices so much easier because I don't have to pick and choose for every meal, because I know that there are certain things I will eat, certain things I won't, if you are a vegan. There are, what else can it be? Religion. If say I'm a Catholic or I'm a Muslim, then there's certain things that fall within, there's certain rules that you will follow. If you say I'm a caring parent, and as a result, that means that when I'm working from home, my kids are going to take priority over professional goals. And you don't have to think about it because that's part of your identity. So what is it that you can say is an identity that will help me advance this goal or this project that I've got in mind? Okay, so it doesn't have to be something that you currently have as part of your identity. It could be like a jacket that you're going to wear, and that jacket is going to give you the superpower of that identity. So I use this when I'm teaching people skills, and I remember doing this with a school group once. I don't work with a lot of school groups, with a lot of students, but I did this with this one school group to help them with study skills leading up to their exams. And I said, do this as if process and think of some mentor, somebody who you respect and you admire, and you think they'd be able to handle this and be able to study well for an exam. And I got them to do that and imagine what that would be like and what would this person do. And then I asked a couple of volunteers, and somebody said, this girl put up her hand and she said, my hero, my mentor was Harry Potter. So she's going, what would Harry Potter do in this situation? Now, it's not that she was looking back through all the Harry Potter books. She didn't write to J.K. Rowling and say, what would Harry Potter do? She was tapping into that identity part of her, and like what she knew about Harry Potter's identity, and go, what would Harry Potter do? So I like jokingly say that my hero is Mark Taylor, Tubby Taylor. So I'll go, okay. Got my replica ashes here. And you go for leadership, what would Tubby Taylor do? Okay, and it's actually saying, if I had that identity of somebody who would do what's required to achieve this goal or build this relationship, what would that identity be? What would I take on? And because it's as if, all you're doing is you're playing a game. You're playing a game. And if you don't like that jacket, you can take it off and try another one. But if you create that identity for yourself, it's even stronger. It's even stronger than habits. And it then drives actions. So identity drives habits, which then drives actions. But I want you to do all three of them, because it's not easy to just take on a cloak, put on a cloak and take on an identity immediately. Okay, any questions about that? Any questions or comments around there? That identity thing, it seems a bit weird to say, I'm just going to, what would Tubby Taylor do in this situation? But it's not a bad idea. And if you can, as I said, it's something that you can try and then discard if you don't like it, and then try something else. But if you can create that identity and you say, I am this kind of person, I am a saver, not a spender. I'm a caring parent. I'm a teacher. I'm a learner. I'm a sharer. I am an empathetic person. So I'll be kind to people in this time of great uncertainty. So if you can build up that identity and take it on as if you have it, it's really powerful. Okay. All right. Is everyone happy with that? So we've got these three things. You've got your three top priorities, and I reckon later you can go and do this for the other 5 as well. I think this is really useful to do with your team if you haven't already done this sort of exercise. So you've got your 3 top priorities, and for each of them, you've got the aha bits, the action, the habit, and the as if, the identity. And this is kind of your roadmap, your starting point for your next projects, your next goals, your most important relationships. I want to teach you one last principle and one last process that's especially useful when things are changing and when things might go wrong, because it's very easy for us to spend this time in this online meeting where we've got rid of interruptions, distractions. We've created this perfect path for us, and we've identified our top 3 or top 8 things, and we've said, here's what we're going to do. But what happens when things go wrong? And I want to teach you this process called a PreMortem. So I'll explain the process to you, and then I'll give you a few minutes to work in a small group to just help each other with this process. So the pre-mortem process is based on the medical post-mortem. So the post-mortem happens when there's an operation and the patient dies. The surgeon and the team get together and they figure out what went wrong so it doesn't happen again next time. So some Harvard researchers said, why don't we turn that around and create this thing called a pre-mortem, which organizations can use in their day-to-day and their planning for their business. And the way the pre-mortem works is that you set yourself a goal, and it may be a 3-month goal, maybe a 12-month goal, maybe a 5-year goal. And I reckon if you're starting, 3-month goals are pretty good. And you imagine, you do this as a team, you say, let's imagine, folks, that we get to the end of the 3 months and a project failed, or that we didn't achieve our goal. So this is the exact opposite of old-fashioned goal setting, which says, imagine you achieve your goal and how good will you feel. Imagine that you'll be richer, happier, sexier, more popular, and imagine all of that, and that's going to drive you towards your goal. This is the PreMortem is not working that way. It's saying, imagine that we failed, and then say, we're looking back 3 months and say, what went wrong? What happened? Did we lose a key person? Did borders change? Was there another outbreak of COVID-19? Was there a vaccine that solved everything, and therefore we didn't need to go down the path that we're planning? Is it something that happened internally? Did we have a restructure? So what happened in that last 3 months? And you're still imagining this, but you identify the things that could have happened or could happen that would derail you from achieving your goal or finishing the project. And then because you're just imagining it, you then decide what you can do to put into place as contingency plans. And some of it is just refining the project so that you know you can take this into account and have a backup plan. We know that so-and-so has got long service leave, or we know that we're going to lose. So there's some research that says that 2 million Australians are considering career change after COVID-19. So if you know that stat and you go, well, there's a good chance we could lose, one in 6 of our team in the next year. So then what can you do about it? So you either create a contingency plan or you create a plan B that you can then switch to and change direction. So it's really useful to do a pre-mortem, and you do this at the start of setting your goal. Okay, does everyone understand what the pre-mortem process is? You think about what's happening you think about the end, and you failed. And then you identify what might have gone wrong. Okay, I'm going to get you to do a little version of this pre-mortem in small groups. And the way it works is it's a modified version of this. And what I will do in a couple of minutes is break you up into groups and think now about what might go wrong in this goal that you've got, or this project that you're working on, and identify one thing that might go wrong. So in your groups, what you say is, here's a goal I've got, here's one thing that might go wrong. And the other people in the group, they will offer a suggestion, and the suggestion follows this formula. You say, you could something. Okay, so for example, let's do this. I've got a goal to publish my next book by the end of January. I've got quite a lot of time to do it in that time. And what could go wrong? Well, what could go wrong is that I'll just lose momentum. And look, like January at the moment is looking like most Januaries, reasonably quiet work-wise, but I could get distracted by other things. So can you, in the chat room, give me some suggestions, starting with the words you could, in order to avoid that problem that could occur. Okay, so I'm going to write a book. It's going to be published by the end of January, and I think I might just get distracted by other things. Can you give me some suggestions? Okay, to get over those distractions, what could I do? So you could dedicate time each day to writing. Thank you, Lee. Break hand, then use dictation. Thank you, Catherine. You could lock yourself away. Thank you, Chris. You could have something to look forward to as a reward in February if you meet the goal. Thank you. Thank you, Trevor. You could have someone check your progress. Marina, publish what you have done in segments. Thank you. Julia, Pomodoro. Thank you. Turning it around on me. Okay, so here's how it works, right? So people give you suggestions, and your only response that you're allowed is thank you. So I can't go, oh, you know what, I've tried Pomodoro, but it doesn't work for me. I don't really like it. Can't do any of that. All I do is be grateful for the suggestion. Say thank you. And you'd be surprised how many I've already can see some amazing suggestions that have come through that I think, yeah, no, of course, I can do that. So thank you for that. All right, so we're going to do this. So I'm going to break you up into little groups here, and we'll work in small groups, and it's a pretty quick exercise. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and then we'll just come back and I'll just wrap up. So as the way it works, so have in mind for yourself one of your goals you're going to work on. If it's a really personal thing and you don't want to share with the group, pick a different one. So have a goal that you're going to work on, and you know some obstacle that could get in the way. And then what you're looking for is a suggestion from each of the people in the group, and then you just simply swap. Okay, so it's a really quick idea, and I reckon you take notes on the suggestions that you get. And remember, your only response to suggestions is thank you. All right, welcome back, folks. I hope you found that exercise useful. I want to give credit to that process that you could process is from Marcus Buckingham. It's called Feed Forward. So if you want to look up Marcus Buckingham and some other processes around, like why feedback fails and why you should do something else instead, this is called the Feed Forward process that we just did. And the previous process is called a PreMortem. So as you can imagine, like the opposite of a post-mortem. So these are really useful processes that you can use with your teams as well. So just to wrap up, I reckon the most important thing, so when people do run these workshops with me, and when I run this and I facilitate this, I ask people what's the most valuable thing they get. And quite often it's something like the Pomodoro technique or the 3 things, or even inbox 0, which we talked about today, Julia, and I wasn't even planning to. But I reckon these little bits of paper where you've written down your projects, your relationships, your priorities, they're the most important things. The things that you've written and you've said, these are going to be my activity that I'm going to do now, the action I'm going to take now, the habits I'm going to build that will help me, and the identity I'm going to take on. Those are the really important things for us. So Feed Forward, I think if you just search Marcus Feed Forward, but it's actually Marcus, type that in for you, Marcus Buckingham. Yeah, so Ray says the identity concepts are very useful. So look, different people get different value from this, and this is part of the reason that I like running this with groups, and I like running it in the online version as well. And by the way, as I said at the start, if you want me to come in and work with your team on this, I'd love to do that. Of course, we can do that in person now in many parts of Australia, but we can do it online as well. And it's a 90-minute masterclass that I run. So please have a chat with me about that. As I said at the start, people think of me as only talking about high-level strategic planning, but this sort of goal setting and prioritizing and knowing what matters is absolutely critical, and especially for the Gen Ys and the Gen Zs in your teams. They want to work for leaders and organizations who've got a vision, and they want to make sure that their passion aligns with the team's purpose and the organization's purpose. So have a chat with me about that. But also, please take advantage of the fact that I'll send out the recording of this, and you can watch that again and have a look at the bits that you didn't have time to do or that you want to share with your team. So please do that. And in the meantime, so this is my last public online presentation for the year. So thanks everyone for coming along. Thanks for participating, and stay safe and healthy. I'll see you in the new year. Bye for now.